The transportation depends where you're at. If you're in the city, your transportation is buses, and you just have to figure out all those routes. But if you spend a lot of time in Santa Ana, you'll figure out the routes pretty nicely. Outside of the city, they use what's called Moto Taxis. So they're taxis, and they're red and three-wheeled, and you just kind of flag them down, and they'll just take you wherever you want. You're gonna find that a lot of stores, like a lot of houses, are stores. They have two parts of the door. One's the metal frame, and the other part's the metal door. You can open the metal door, and then you still have that metal frame with the bars, and you can look into their house and see all the things that they're selling. You're gonna find toilet paper normally, like everybody eats beans, so you're gonna find bags of beans. They have candy and chips. Chips is a huge thing down there. They have different varieties I've never seen before. Most people, when you hear about El Salvador, and I knew I heard it a lot before I left, is definitely the crime in El Salvador and the danger. It's probably just due to all the gangs that are down there, but I was never robbed. Nothing ever really happened to me. And there are gangs. You're gonna see them. They'll be there, but they don't really touch missionaries. We have certain areas we can't go at night. In certain areas, there's parts that we can't knock on doors. It's more dangerous for young men than it is for women, and that's due to the gangs. And so people that aren't missionaries, if there's a young man that crosses into another territory and that gang that's in that territory does not know them, they'll assume that they're from a rival gang. And so that's when there's problems. And so it's very common that young men are not allowed to cross from one territory to another if they are not known. They normally know that and they abide by that. The weather is really, really, really hot. And then it gets to rainy season. It's really rainy. It rains, just pours, like tropical storms. That's just a typical. But if it doesn't rain enough, it's really hot still. Areas that are cold. Los Naranjos, which is really freezing, and Apaneca is really freezing. And then there's Huayua and Ataco, and that's cold, but it's not freezing. It gets really bad in November and December, which is when I was in Huayua. I had to pull out my leather jacket at night for those 2 months because it got pretty cold. Oh my goodness, I love Salvadorian food. Their most common dish and what they're most known for is called pupusas. And pupusas is basically you take corn flour and you make a dough out of it and you put cheese in it. That's the basic pupusa. You put cheese in it and you put it on a pan. And if you want to mix it up, and there's lots and lots of kinds. You can put in beans. They put in something called, they do revueltas, and so that's beans with pig. They also do crazy ones where they'll put carrots in it. They'll put so there's a garlic one where they mix garlic with cheese. They will do jalapenos, they'll do shrimp. And so there's just this crazy variety of pupusas that are all so good. I love pupusas. So you're gonna find pupuserias where they make pupusas like on every corner. Everybody makes pupusas down there because it's how they make their living. And so like it doesn't matter where you are, you're gonna find a pupuseria and you're going to eat pupusas. There's no way you're going to get through without eating pupusas. And definitely if you're in the towns like I was, you're going to make pupusas at least a few times. They also have plato típico. So for breakfast, a typical meal that they would have for breakfast is beans, but it's liquefied with a cream. And it's a cream that's very difficult to find, but it's really good. And then they'll do fried plantains, kind of like bananas. And they'll do scrambled eggs. But it's not typical scrambled eggs. It's like with tomatoes and onions and all that stuff, all mixed around. And then if they want to get fancy, they'll do a type of cheese that's white. Then they will have it with tortillas. Their tortillas are really thick. They're probably about like that thick. And they're about this round. And so that's their tortillas. It's not typical. And if they're not eating it with tortillas, they'll eat it with rolls, basically. They call it pan francés. There's really, really good rolls. So that's a typical breakfast, but it's so good. I love it. They also have street food. They do French fries. It's a really common thing down there. They do French fries, and they put cheese on it, and they put the ketchup on it, and mayonnaise, and you just eat it out of the bowl like that. They also do yuca, which is a type of root, and they'll fry that, and you put in it salsa with cabbage and cucumber and all that stuff shredded up. And then there's another one. It's really, really good. It's called Pastelitos. So it's just like they have some kind of dough. I believe it's corn dough. And they'll put meat in it or they'll put potatoes in it. They'll roll it up in a ball and they'll just fry it. And then you do the same thing, salsa and the shredded vegetables. Well, I've only tried it with the salsa, but I absolutely love pastelitos. Crazy foods, you can find them, but they're not typical. Sometimes they eat iguana down there. I never did. I never had anyone make iguana. And then sometimes they eat possum. But again, I never ate possum, so it's just like something that I heard people would eat. Before my mission, I hated bananas. But when I ate a small banana, so it's called a guineo, so it's like a banana, but it's like smaller, I loved it. And it might have been because it was just fresher, but I loved it. And ever since, I have just loved bananas. There's lots of fruits. You're going to find pineapple. You're going to find mango. There's actually season. I guess you could call it something about the weather because there's falling mango everywhere. Every turn you're going to make, unless you're in the city, there's a mango tree. And so when mango season hits, which is about May, I believe it starts, and they eat most of these things, they'll eat it green or they'll eat it ripe. Or the in-between. They will just eat fruit, however it is. But you'll have mango trees that just fall, and you'll actually walk past them. They're just fermenting in the street. Like, it's just ridiculous how many mangoes there are. And then you're going to have a lot of crazy fruit that you've probably never ever seen in your life. There's zapote, there's guindas, maracuyá, marañón. Marañón is the fruit that comes from a cashew tree. So you have the fruit, and then you have the cashew, so there's actually a fruit that they eat. Although not everybody really likes the fruit. I do. You're going to find star fruit down there as well. It's just a plethora of fruit, and it's amazing. So there's some really interesting things about holidays, about the culture, it's kind of fun. It's interesting. Christmas is fireworks. So they will light fireworks for Christmas, and it's like New Year's. They do have like some kind of like Christmas traditions. That's when the Catholic Church is really doing their parades, Day of the Dead. And that's a big thing down in El Salvador, and it's not really what you would imagine, like what you kind of hear about in Mexico. So what they do is that they go to their cemeteries, and they put tons and tons and tons of flowers. They're normally plastic flowers, actually. Or they're paper flowers that have been dipped in wax, so they'll last a long time. And they just cover the whole tomb in these flowers and decorate it. And they just spend the whole day there. They eat lunch. And that's a kind of a culture thing, is that they're not in rows of plots. They are all over the place. You have to be walking around. You accidentally step on a tomb. It's just like a normal thing. And so people will eat lunch. Sometimes they sit on the tombs of their relatives to eat lunch. And people like come, like I was in Hawaii when this happened, and that's a touristy place. There's lots of tourists that come in, and they'll walk through and just see this different way of doing the Day of the Dead. But it's a way to remember their ancestors. For the cultural do's and don'ts, you just eat everything that's on your plate, or they get offended. And you're going to find a lot of poor families, and so you have to eat everything they give you because they don't have a lot. And they normally will give you a lot when they don't have much. In El Salvador, if you don't use slang, they don't really understand what you're saying. You will find a lot of old people who can't read, but they're always nice. Like, most people are really, really nice. The cultural thing is that you greet everyone in the street. You will say hi, you will say good morning to everyone. That's just how it is down there anywhere you go. You say hi to everyone, and they will say a phrase, which is very common, that says, que Dios le bendiga. And it just means, may God bless you. And that's a very common phrase they say down there. If you're leaving or if you walk across the street and they're going this way, they'll give you that greeting. It's a very generous culture and a very kind culture. So something like really cool that I guess is just like a side note is the national bird of El Salvador is called el torogos. And it's a really, really pretty bird. It's blue and green and orange, and it has like these 2 tail feathers that just go down, and it's really noticeable. But the cool thing is those birds aren't just in zoos now. They're still in the wild, and I've actually seen them. Not really up close, except for one that someone cut off their tail feathers, which is really sad. There are so many birds, and there's obnoxious loud birds, and certain seasons there's locusts, and they're giant. They're like this big. They don't do anything, but they do hop up sometimes and scare you. Certain areas there's bats. In the rainy season there's lots of toads everywhere. So if you're not scared of toads, it's not a big deal. But I've had lots of companions that don't like toads, and it's kind of funny. Cockroaches is a common thing just because it's humid. But the cool thing is definitely the birds. They're really obnoxious and loud, but they make cool sounds. Like, it's like being in a tropical forest, because I guess that's basically what El Salvador is anyway. But normally you're just going to find the typical brown ones that make cool sounds. But you will sometimes, rare cases, find entoragos or like other colorful birds. And so that's actually really cool. Language. It was very difficult for me in the beginning to speak Spanish, but I got it down after that. There's 4 parts of the language. There's the speaking, there's the understanding, there's the reading and the writing. And those come separately. Although it doesn't sound like it makes sense, it really does. If you want to learn how to speak Spanish, you have to speak it. If you want to learn how to understand Spanish, you have to listen. You have to try to understand. If you want to read it, you gotta read it. If you want to write it, you gotta write it. And then that's how it goes. There's a lot of slang. So you have to learn the slang, but I really suggest trying to learn the actual word as well, just so that you're not coming back speaking a type of Spanish that no one understands. Don't ever be content with the amount that you can speak and say that's enough. And we have to keep trying and keep excelling, even if it's just 1 word a day. They'll say super pilas, which is like super awesome. They'll say things like se la pica, which is a phrase for Mexicans that is offensive. In El Salvador it is not, and you'll hear it a lot. It just means you're cocky. You're full of it.